Well, those are live images now from Nyeri County at the County Assembly, where members of the County Assembly are being sworn in. The numbers that we were given is that about 70 MCAs will go through this process, 30 elected and 40 nominated. And then after that, they will go to the voting process where they'll select their speaker and deputy speaker. We are told there are 10 candidates who have applied for those positions. And surprisingly, not a single lady in the list of the 10 candidates who have applied to be considered for the post of speaker and deputy speaker. Strange indeed. Hopefully we'll get some clarification on why that happened. But nevertheless, that is what is happening now. Yesterday we saw similar images in Nairobi and other parts of the country as well, even as this process continues. Well, we carry on with our discussion in studio, but as we mentioned also as well, NASA Nairobi leaders are meeting at a city hotel. We'll also head over there shortly. We also know that the IEBC is expected to meet with Jubilee today and NASA after that, and we'll be able to follow up with whatever will happen in those meetings and give you updates as and when the program continues, as and when we get, of course, that update in regard to that. You're watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV. Thank you to everyone who's writing to us, 22422. Let me see if I can read one or two more SMS, and then I carry on with this discussion in studio. Someone here, you don't give us your name, but you say, we cannot keep on being pegged under politicians' interests. Kenyans need to move on. Let politicians leave IEBC alone to conduct its mandate. The clock is ticking. Another one here says, David from Githurai, it was a mistake of IEBC to have converted polling streams into polling stations without meeting thresholds of a polling station, thus creating many ungazetted polling stations, although IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati sought to respond to that. While another person here says, the whole system of IEBC, wow, needs complete overhaul in order to win confidence of Kenyan people. Remember, the Supreme Court decision is final. Before we took the break, Senator Kangata was just about to respond. I can give, to some of the discussions here in studio, I can give you a chance to do so now.
Yes, the problem my colleague from NASA has is that he doesn't appreciate how, at times, the concept of legal precedent works. According to that concept, any decision that is made by the Supreme Court is not only binding to the disputants, it's also binding to the courts which are lower to it. So, meaning the decision that was made by the Supreme Court in 2013, it is still binding only if at all the new decision that has been made by the new Supreme Court may have overturned some few aspects to it. So those aspects which were not overturned, they do still operate and have the full force of law. So one of the issues that was raised last time, 2013, was the issue concerning what happens if at all there is a fresh election ordered by the Supreme Court. And the court was very clear that only number 1 and 2, those parties that have gone to court will be entitled to go for a repeat election, and that is what has informed the new decision by the Chebukati team to only have on ballot 2 persons, that is Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. Okay. Be that as it may, we wouldn't mind any other candidate joining the fray. For us, we know we won against all those candidates combined. So therefore, whether there are 5, whether there is 1, we are more than ready to beat NASA.
Let me ask you, does the Jubilee Party have any worries about the technology around the elections and about polling stations as well, the concerns that were raised by NASA, or for them that's not an issue?
Well, the main problem has to do with the Supreme Court. One of the reasons why we are attacking the Supreme Court is because it has not even given us the full verdict. If that verdict was out, some of the problem raised here by my colleague here and also Daktari there would have been addressed. For instance, there is the issue concerning whether we have ungazetted polling centers. That one we are not so sure whether that was upheld by the Supreme Court or not. Because if indeed it was not upheld, so what IEBC did on August 8th ought to remain. But if at all that argument was upheld by the Supreme Court, then surely that ought to be addressed. So I would urge, from where I sit, we need to push Supreme Court to issue that verdict as soon as possible, so that based on the findings of the Supreme Court, maybe IEBC can take what we call remedial actions. Number 2, Yes, on the issue of technology, we believe that technology that was deployed on August 8th was the correct technology. From where we sit, we have not seen any problem with it.
Okay.
And therefore, we don't think that there is any need for us to keep on changing what was used on August 8th. The only problem that I have on Chebukati, compare the responses he has given to NASA and the one that was made to the Jubilee Party. The one that was made to the Jubilee Party was quite offensive. It was very clear.
You believe so?
Of course, it's very clear. He said in one statement that no, you're not supposed to come and interfere with it.
I'll give you a chance. Yeah, I'll give you a chance, Honorable Malo.
In one paragraph of that letter, it was quite clear. He told us that no, you people, you have no right to come and interfere with the independence of IEBC. But no, he has said, no, show me.
We have it actually.
No. He has not. The issue of independence has only been cited in reply to the letter from our party.
Okay.
But in the two responses which you have just read out there, very clearly, he has not reiterated the so-called doctrine of independence. So therefore, why is it that he seems to be treating the so-called NASA with some glove hands, but when it comes to us, he's treating us with some iron hands?
Okay.
That's unfair. Number two, the final point, my final point, before he replies, I want to reiterate, Chebukati does not have any power to shepherd that commission alone. This is a collegiate exercise. He needs to call the commissioners and say, as a commission, we have resolved. It should be a resolution of the commission.
Okay.
But this idea where he seems to have abrogated all the powers of the commission upon himself, and that is unfair. He does not control that commission. It should be a resolution of the commission, the entire commission.
I need to stop you there because I need to bring in Honorable Malwa.
My friend Honorable Kangnata is misleading the public because the way the commission has responded to Jubilee it is based on their demands. Okay? If you are going to interfere, if you are going to dictate to the commission that an officer so and so is known to be a NASA fellow or whatever the case, this is where they want to drive away the independence. And for heaven's sake, you have to quote Article 249 of the Constitution, which talks not just only about the IEBC. Those commissions, all of them are independent. They are only subject to the Constitution and any other written law. And that is very okay, because it was based on their demands. When it comes to the NASA side, we didn't demand things that are affecting the independence. For instance, we just wanted to know the level of preparedness and what have they done to seal those loopholes that had been identified by the Supreme Court. For instance, if my friend here comes and says they have no problem with the technology, look, on TV we were seeing some statistics, and the Supreme Court, the judges asked, what were those things on the TV? And the IEBC lawyer Nyamodi didn't have words. He was just fumbling. I heard him saying, these are the statistics. He changed from statistics to the data, that they did not reflect the true picture of what was being counted on the ground. So that explains to you it is technology, because that is a reflection of the KIMS, because after the voter tallying has been done at the constituency level, it's supposed to be transmitted, and he claimed that they were not representing the portal. So the issue of technology, it is a big problem. And the issue of areas which are not being gazetted, I saw my friend in court, it seems he was not listening. These were things which were submitted, and it was proven that some areas which were not gazetted, they had brought in some results. That explains there's a problem of that KIMS. And for heaven's sake, even a one child, how do you bring in the results and yet it's just showing linear? You saw the 54 and 44%. It shows it had been programmed somewhere, irrespective of how many votes were coming in. It was stagnant. We wanted to look at the issue of zigzag, ups, downs, you know. We saw everything was stagnant.
You're talking about
at 54, absolutely.
You were hoping for random nature.
Absolutely. How comes? Even a stupid person will see, unless this thing has been programmed, unless this has been programmed in a way, whatever you put in, it just goes negative or positive. You cannot just maintain a straight line. It was linear. So we expected some aspects of randomness in terms of when the results come, this one goes up, this one goes down. We saw the percentage never changed. This to tell you that maybe that KIMS technology aspect had been a constant or a logarithm the way they were using it. had been put somewhere, and that's why the servers, we didn't access the servers. We were told they're in Paris, and Paris now people are sleeping. And we know very well the difference here and Paris, maybe an average of 2 hours.
Okay.
So it was 1 o'clock, obviously, in Paris people are not sleeping. It must have been at 11 o'clock. And up to now,
yes,
NASA did not access the servers. Because that's
so that we get a way forward, because we need to get a way forward. Are you happy with the proposals by the IEBC chairperson? Get your experts, embed them with his team, find a way forward.
I'll say because it was a fair response.
Okay.
And from the way he has said, the chairman, he has said he'll need also our side experts,
yes,
and from their side for purposes of fairness.
And international experts.
Absolutely. As well. So I find that response, it is fair. But that's not good enough. Because
it is fair but not good enough.
Yeah, because we don't have time. We are going for the elections. They've made a decision on 17th. So what level of preparedness or what assurance is there that will not have the same 54% stagnant somewhere? Maybe something has been done in Paris or wherever. We want to go to Paris and access and make sure that these things, these servers are neutral. We are not going to have any foul play of having the. It's useless to go back. And we're going to have that 54% and 44%.
Okay. And I think your point has been heard.
We're going to ask them. Those numbers you're going to see on TV.
Yes.
Do they reflect the true picture on the ground? Because that's our fear. And it's a genuine fear. It's not an issue of interfering with the independence.
Thank you so much, Honorable Amala. Let me bring Lillian into this. So much, I don't even know where to start. But just in terms of clarifying, a lot of people are asking about polling stations. Maybe you can help us just understand what IEBC can do or cannot do within the next 39 days, if we're counting down to October 17th. Others are asking about returning officers. For example, someone from Nairobi here, and let me see if I can read this message, is asking, Wanjiko from Nairobi is saying, the returning officers in charge of the problematic areas need to be reassigned or charged with offenses. Political parties should insist on that. So just help us to understand how those two functions would work, and if there's even time to look at them afresh.
Allow me to start with the technology.
Okay.
Before the amendments to the Elections Act in 2016, Section 44 of the Elections Act had only one provision, that IEBC may use appropriate technology. Now, following proposals from NASA, last year we had that particular provision revoked and new provisions were brought in, which now enumerated specific areas.
Complementary, that's the one.
With access codes and logs and the KIM's kit, everything, all in Section 44. Now, this is what I'm presuming IEBC will now have to get the experts from both sides. They sit with an outsider, maybe international people who have had a lot of experience in electoral and handling of technology, because technology is very, very delicate, and we can see what happened even in 2013. We had challenges with the system, and in 2013 we knew it had to do with the testing of the equipment, and we did not have enough time to train the officials. So there were lapses there, and we accepted when we started receiving results and were stuck at about 44% of the transmission at Bomas. Now that is an area that is really technical, and they have to look into it. The second issue of polling stations, IEBC does a very technical and in-depth exercise that we call mapping of polling stations. They go out there with experts, and not just anybody does that. People who are well versed with issues of the GPRS and the coordinates, they go out there and check out all the schools that will be used during the elections. So they map them out, they get their coordinates, so that when it comes to transmission, we can even see the maps on what is happening. Those of us who can read the map, and even those of us who cannot read, we can see the dots where there is a problem, there is maybe network issues, and we cannot have the results in quickly. And all these things have been done. But again, we can see there were issues of transmission. And remember, the officials have instructions that you only do it once. If you cannot do it and you do not have network, get to a place where there is network and attempt to send.
Yes, to send.
If it fails, don't try a second time. So you see, many people, many of the officers are at a loss when they find such challenges, and they are also not experts in all these issues of
and that's another talking point altogether.
So that's also another area where they need to go. And I would agree with Wamalwa, and training. They would, of course, have to do that. They would have to have a crash program where they'll have to look at, again, how the officers are well prepared to handle all these issues. And looking at that, the time is not there. And I would agree, I would agree with you that they do not have that luxury of time. We are now working on back to 17th. So it's back to back. Everything will be back to back. So the sooner these meetings are held with the experts, the better, so that we can know what was the problem with these polling stations.
Okay.
You know, we do not know the details from the ruling. We don't have the details. But I'm sure internally they already know where the problems are.
Let me
At least they would for now know what to rectify going into 17th of October.
Okay, I want to move this discussion forward and take a look at some of the other IEBC responses to NASA. Joy, I'm coming to you to help us look at that. Can we take a look at the other 3 responses? So what we did, it was a very long document, about 2 or 3 pages, but we picked specific aspects where we felt IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati was responding to direct questions by NASA. Are those graphics ready? The remaining 3. Let's take a look at one of them now. This is in regards to register of voters, and the chairperson says as follows: in your letter you make reference to the register of voters. I must emphasize that we have already certified the register of voters that was uploaded to the KIMS. I wish to state that unlike previous elections, in 2017 we have only 1 register of voters. Let's come back and take a look at the next one, which should be coming up on your screen shortly. The next one is in regards to recruitment and training of new returning officers across the country. The chairperson taking time to respond again to some of the queries of concerns by NASA. And it reads as follows: given the short period of time before the presidential election, I may not be in a good position to recruit and train new returning officers across the country. I have, however, tasked my project team to review specific cases of returning officers that may have failed to discharge their duties effectively. And so that was how he responded on this particular matter. And we have one more. This is about something that Joy actually raised, whether the IEBC is communicating effectively in this time, whether Kenyans have enough information about the decisions that IEBC has to make moving forward. And this is how he responded: I intend to hold weekly briefings with the presidential candidates and agents to discuss emerging issues. I also intend to hold weekly briefing sessions for civil society, religious leaders, and the business community. As the crux of the decision from the Supreme Court appears to have been technology, I have also decided to embed 2 ICT experts from Jubilee and NASA in my project team. I want to give each of my guests, starting with Joy, a chance to respond to some of those, should I call them responses, by Wafula Chebukati. Joy, we can start with you.
In fact, the first response has something to do with what the people who sent a text was asking. Do I still have to go back to my polling station? Now, the way the voters register has been structured this time is that where you registered as a voter, that is the KIMS kit that has your information. So if you turn up at any other polling station, even within the same primary school, but if you go to a wrong stream, you will not be identified because you are registered at a specific place. And so with that in mind, therefore, we have to understand that this time around, unlike what we saw in the confusion we saw in 2013, we don't have to have counter, backup. Just go to where you are registered, your things will be found there, and go back home. Now, the audit of this register is what even Honorable Amal was talking about earlier, being the subject of the bone of contention. Sometimes it's easy to see where they're coming from, but also on the other hand, you must understand nothing will ever be perfect. So you do an audit that gives you the absolute best scenario that you can hope to get out of it, which is what I think we have right now.
Okay.
One thing that also Ms. Gillian has raised, and is a criticism not just of the Elections Act, but of our laws across the board. We over-legislate. The legislators try to imagine every single possible scenario and try to put in checks and balances across everything.
Which eventually
and so we
might work
end up meshing ourselves in our own laws, and this at the end of the day, rather than creating an ambiguity, becomes the very net that tangles us. And that's what we are seeing with this current Elections Act. The Criteria Commission had made a recommendation that prior to an election, try and desist from changing the election rules, the elections
to an election,
Yes, so that you maintain the predictability of what is supposed to happen prior to. We are criticizing the IEBC of not communicating enough, because even we don't know what holds anymore. There have been so many changes. Even yesterday, I was looking at one of the groups and somebody was asking, oh, what are the new practice rules from court regarding elections petitions?
Yes.
Because even in court, what we knew in 2013 is no longer applicable today. Kenyans need, or rather our legislators need to do a complete overhaul, a complete audit of our laws as well. We need to get to a place where the laws are also simple, understandable, credible, verifiable, because our laws sometimes are, the devil is the detail. Now coming to this final response by the IEBC, when you set a project team and then you tell people, come let's embed plus your experts and your who in here, one of the things that I had being said during the case was that the IEBC was being very cautious about who they were letting into their system because of the risk of hacking. And that's why they only wanted certified IEBC officials to have that access. Now when you see a situation where they've gotten to a place, they're opening it up plus to international people and party agents, it tells me, one, Saffron is going to void our warranty. After this, the Kim's system will be using at our own risk.
Because it's been opened up to...
Because it's been opened up to people who are not...
Although it could be the read-only access, maybe?
Read-only access that was denied even during the court process.
Absolutely.
I don't think so. So we've gotten to a place where I think we need to simplify things.
Okay.
Like Ms. Lillian said, go back to the old section 40. For this, employ appropriate technology. If you're in a place where 4G is impossible, don't kill yourself over 4G. Just use the paper. Find a way of getting that there to get the paper to where it means. We need to come to a place, even as Kenyans, let's simmer down. If we're able to use, for example, technology like M-Pesa securely across the nation, maybe we may just need to have a discussion with Safaricom, see if we can get that patent and develop a similar program for elections. If we are able to print currency in Kenya, and now counterfeiting has gotten to a place where it's actually at an all-time low, it's not as bad as before, maybe we should talk to Delaru to do our printing rather than going to Al Ghurair. It's time to just become simpler and make things easier so that Kenyans are able to get value for their money, because that's 45 billion gone, another 10 billion being spent. We need to get to a place we even
what could happen after that. So let us be able to afford the lifestyle that we're choosing for ourselves.
So
Mr. Kangata has been very quiet. I don't know what he's thinking even as we're having this particular discussion. You've seen IBC's response to NASA. I know you say you feel IBC are taking more time to respond to NASA than to Jubilee, but nevertheless, I want to know from you, do you have any concerns about the register of voters, the recruiting of officers? Do you want new officers to be recruited for this particular exercise? And also maybe your thoughts on even the embedding of ICT experts within CIBC from Jubilee as well?
Well, to me that's a good move to the extent that each and every party has been given an opportunity to be embedded into that team. To me that's okay. Of course I have an issue where we have 2 experts from NASA, 2 experts from our coalition, whereas we feel we are a bigger party. Yes, Elias is a minion. So maybe the representation ought to have been 2:1. And that's number 1. Number 2, we do not have an issue with IBC so far, except now the new developments that we are now seeing. We thought that which was employed in last elections was quite appropriate. And by the way, this idea my colleague is talking about at the 45 billion went into West Norway. Surely we are talking about members of county assembly, members of parliament, senators, governors, so many people who have assumed office as we speak, and life is continuing. This is just a very small element of that election, and that is one of the reasons why we objected to the Supreme Court decision. Because look here, IEBC used that money to conduct elections for MCs, MP, governor, senators. The vast majority of those people do not have a petition. By the way, compare the petitions that have been filed this year and the ones that were filed in 2013. By this time, we had about, I don't know, was it 500 petitions in 2013? Now we have about only 100 petitions. That to me is to me that is evidence that this election was beyond reproach. Otherwise,
it's not a sign that those who would want to go to court can't afford it, maybe, that it was also a very expensive election. Some would say that it's just too expensive.
No, you can't say that. Because I would imagine...
You get a chance.
You see, I'm not so sure whether we have hiked filing fees this year. I think to the best of my... Yes. Well, when you talk about this is a more expensive election, what do you mean? I would imagine That's neither here nor there. We are talking of money to file a petition. It has remained constant. So therefore, if you feel aggrieved with an election of, let's say, a certain governor, a certain MCA, you ought to go to court and ventilate your case. How come 2013 cases were so many? This year, the cases are too few. That shows indeed the elections were quite credible.
Okay.
So therefore, to the extent...
That's his take. Okay, finish. So that's...
Well, another point is...
Yes.
And I want to reiterate...
Finally?
Look at the responses from IEBC in regard to the concerns which have been raised by NASA. They are quite detailed. They are quite detailed. You'll see a situation where he is replying blow to blow to various issues raised by NASA. But for us, the tone of that letter that came from IEBC was quite dismissive. To me, that is very unfair. Jebukati, be fair to us. We also stakeholders. In fact, we had won. From where we sit, we had won the election. So why mistreat us?
Okay. Lillian, again, let me allow him. But you have to keep it short because we've skipped a lady here.
Yeah, I want to make it short.
Yes.
Honorable Gangata needs to understand that if the process is fraudulent, obviously the output is also fraudulent. And it is very, very wrong for him to say that they are a bigger party and they should be given 5 representation in terms of the ratio to NASA. That is being selfish. It is very, very wrong. You should have withdrawn that. And the IEBC has been very fair in terms of equity, in terms of equal aspects, so that we have 2 from NASA, 2 from Jubilee, and maybe 2 from the international community.
Okay.
So he actually needs to withdraw that. And lastly, it is very wrong for him to say that 45 billion, that's a lot of money, which Madam has raised, just going up to West. And people who should be held responsible, must be accountable, must be punished. We pass the election offences law. Anybody who has been responsible in terms of tampering with technology for 45 billion to go to the West must be accountable for that. And for him to say that the number of people who came in terms of petitions in 2013 comparing to 2017, this is to say, when you look at the GDP growth in 2013, it was very high. The inflation at that time was very low. Now the inflation is very high. And this is because of the Jubilee government has mismanaged the economy. And that's why the aspect of cost comes in. And that's an indicator to show that even if the costs had remained the same, people could have managed to afford that because at that time, maybe the aspects of inflation, the cost of living. Now the cost of living is crazily high because of mismanagement by the Jubilee government.
Have you also factored in the global cost of living and the global challenges as well?
No.
Brexit.
When you look at the global aspect, when you look at the global aspect, the change has been insignificant, by the way.
Okay.
So this is just from my own perspective.
Okay.
When you look at the inflation at that time in 2013 was about I think it was about 5%. But right now, when you look at the inflation, we're doing 15%.
No, that's
absolutely. It's almost 15%, the current one. Before we went to elections, it was about 13%. And now it's going to 15%. You need to know that going back to the elections, that repeats, the cost implication is crazily high. The business environment, the investors, when you go to cost right now, you can see even tourists are not coming. Even the local investors, when you look at the real market, the real estate industry, it's going down. So when you look at the cost implication, when you look at it in terms of inclusivity, it is crazily high. So you can't say the 45 billion that is nothing.
By the way,
And lastly, now, when you go back to the law, the Elections Act, it is very unfortunate. The Elections Act has gone through a lot of amendments. And this has been a big task to the IEBC. Because as you change the Elections Act, they have to rearrange again. We've been giving them a lot of work. And when you look at the origin of this amendment, the Elections Act, it's been coming from Jubilee side. We had the bipartisan one, that there was Orengo Adikaraitu, which had been agreed upon. All of a sudden, when now IEBC comes in terms of implementing it, in terms of developing regulations, they come with amendments to change. And that's why when you look at that section 44, actually, to be specific, it's 44B, when we are talking about the complementary aspect, it was the hidden agenda. If the issue was to do with, let's say, the 4G, 3G, there was an option of the satellite. And the Communication Authority had come out clearly with that time frame that was there in terms of preparedness. Satellite will have actually come in to resolve areas where the accessibility to the 3G was not possible. So this issue of Elections Act amendments every now and then, which gave more work to the IEBC because they had to develop regulations based on the new changes. It's been coming from the Jubilee side.
Thank you. I think
we raised the issue of KPMG. Let me finalize the issue of KPMG. For heaven's sake, the bipartisan aspect was agreed, and they said to bring an international audit firm which has experience in matters of voter registration ABCD.
And
KPMG, for heaven's sake, it's an international audit firm,
yes,
but it does not have experience or expertise in matters of voting. Again, it was the Jubilee side.
So you have a preferred firm that you recommended?
You know, it was not an issue of recommending here. It is an issue for IEBC to go out and look for that international firm which will qualify in terms of the scope.
Okay.
And let me talk about the project team.
No, I need to stop you there now. I need to stop you there, Honorable Amalo. Lillian, go ahead.
Okay. A few comments about the response.
The responses, yes.
And I would like to make a correction. And I've seen Chepsati saying carefully, unlike previous elections.
Okay,
2017, there was a certified register. I would like to put it on record that in 2013, we had a certified voters register.
One.
But you had the black book and the green book.
Those are different aspects which were prosecuted by the Supreme Court. And we clearly certified our register in February 2013, before we went into the election. And I'm saying that because a lot of misconceptions have come up on that. The Elections Act is very clear. Section 4 is so clear, and it talks about the principal register of voters, which shall be made up of ABCD, up to including the diaspora register. So we did everything in accordance with that particular aspect on voters register. The other aspect is about petitions. This is a debatable area,
yes,
that we are comparing the petitions in 2013
and right now.
Look here, in 2013, the court system, that time the committee of the judiciary was headed by the current Chief Justice. Maraga himself was the head of the committee. And they were looking at preparing for 500 cases. We ended up with 188 cases, petitions in court. Of the 188 petitions, 22 by-elections were conducted. And what happened? Only 2 of those petitions had a different verdict, Mathare and one in Kisii. The rest of the petitions affirmed and confirmed the candidates who had been elected on the 4th of March 2013. So this is an aspect that people can look at, and it is debatable whether it's about the cost or whether it's about the preparations, and whether it's about how far now the institution has come in terms of implementing electoral reforms and strengthening the institution.
Okay.
But if I may just say, currently we are looking at 17th October.
I have to stop you because we have a live event that we need to cross over to.